I know this probably isn't what you want to hear right now, but let's talk about Brutus Beefcake. It's been said that when Brutus Beefcake was set to become The Barber in 1987, the real-life Ed Leslie was unhappy about it. He reportedly didn't like the idea of being saddled with a potentially cartoonish role after having previously climbed WWE's ladder as a mostly muted mauler in The Dream Team. However, after consulting with friend to the end, Hulk Hogan, the Hulkster convinced Beefcake to roll with the gimmick, saying that if Beefcake could make the outlandish idea work, then WWE's faith in him as a performer would only grow. Once he became the Barber, Beefcake would never be more popular. With the role, he reached main event adjacent heights that only came to an end after a tragic accident in 1990. Almost 30 years later, and Beefcake is still using the role on independent shows, even offering haircuts to fans for a fee. I'm not sure if that's better or worse than paying the bushwhackers money to lick you. For Beefcake, the Barber gimmick, while initially undesired, would become a positive identifier for him. His career defined through his cutting and strutting, it's a shining example of how taking on a new role or look, perhaps one drastically different than who you were before, can alter your character in astonishingly incredible ways. In 1987, the brawny, still young Beefcake was probably in no danger of seeing his career flame out with or without a gimmick change. For those in the forthcoming list, there was a little more pressure on the performers to make good on their existing or remaining promise. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and here are 10 gimmicks that saved a wrestler's career. Join us. Number 10, George Wagner becomes gorgeous. Of the living wrestling fans who know the name Gorgeous George, probably less than 2% of them have actually ever hunted down one of his matches for viewing purposes. Yet they know that moniker, the professional handle of a professional wrestling pioneer whose bluster, bravado, and flamboyance inspired the wordsmithery of Muhammad Ali. That alone could be a man's epitaph. Pre-Gorgeous, he was just George Wagner, a nondescript wrestler with an amateur background and a look that didn't exactly turn heads. Inspired by a frilly grappler by the name of Lord Patrick Lansdowne, George set to work on cultivating his own shocking persona, one that would set him apart from the generic boots and tights brawlers that he shared the ring with. The bleached blonde hair, colourful robes, arrogant misdemeanor, and over-the-top antics turned Gorgeous George into a genuine pop culture sensation. His wrestling career lined up with the rise of television, and his showmanship made him into the biggest star in the industry, and by far the brightest flower of the bouquet. And it just wouldn't have happened had he continued to wrestle as the unassuming George Wagner. Certainly the glossy sports entertainment you see today owes its oxygen to Gorgeous George. He not only boosted his own career, but he created careers for countless others. Number 9, Dustin Rhodes strikes gold. The King of the Road match from WCW Uncensored 1995 claimed a number of victims, most of whom were the poor souls that spent money to watch the pay-per-view in the first place. It also claimed match participants Dustin Rhodes and the Blacktop Bully, formerly Demolition Smash, who had violated company policy by blading. They were both fired, and the 26-year-old Rhodes was suddenly looking for work. Rhodes had already found it difficult to escape the looming shadow of Father Dusty Rhodes, one of the most beloved and successful wrestlers in the industry's history. So many second and third generation wrestlers have found that standing on their own 2 feet is even harder than it sounds. For every Bret Hart and Randy Savage, there are countless examples of men and women who found daddy's boots too big to fill. When Rhodes had the role of Goldust suggested to him by Vince McMahon in the summer of 1995, he was admittedly confused by some aspects of it. In fact, he claimed he had to go home and look up the word androgynous. But once he found his groove in the role, slinking about and doling out the shocking head games, Goldust's star was assured. He would forever be Dusty's son, but never again would Dusty's kid be his summary. Number 8, Hogan goes Hollywood. While he ruled WWE as the most popular star of the 1980s, Hogan found life at the top of the WCW cards a little less joyous. While the money and the schedule were to die for, Hulkamania was soundly rejected by the core WCW fanbase that merrily lived in Flair country. By 1996, Hogan was into his 40s and clinging to the last vestiges of his red and yellow glory, without the godlike adulation that once came with it. The decision to turn heel was one Hogan did not come to easily. Hulk hemmed and hawed, but ultimately realized that the association with the undeniably cool Scott Hall and Kevin Nash could be the transfusion of life that he needed desperately. Once Hogan dropped the leg across Randy Savage's throat at the 1996 Bash at the Beach, the former hero had everyone's attention. Some would agree that Hogan's bitter, "you fans can stick it" promo was the greatest of his career, as an ex-Superman furiously ripped the people he'd once made happy and or prosperous, no doubt with some jabs of truth within those words. After donning the NWO black and white garb, Hogan was reborn with swaggering vigor, justifying his main event stay with some much-needed fresh air. Number 7, Rock Hard. Nobody liked Rocky Maivia. If the alternative to Rocky Maivia was eating cow chips, we'd all learn to love the taste. Maivia was the antithesis of what fans wanted to see in 1997, and eventually WWE Brass came to the same conclusion. A heel turn was attempted to try and mine some of the crowd vitriol for the better, and it was just the spark The Rock needed. More and more turns with the microphone only revealed to the audience the potential The Rock had, as his effortless wit and well-conveyed aloofness resonated far more than the put-on gimmick he'd been working with less than a year earlier. The rest is history. The Rock conquered multiple planets and is easily one of the biggest stars not just in wrestling, but in all forms of entertainment. To think that he was just once an afterthought, one that nobody could get excited about seeing, blows the mind. Number 6, the devil's favourite dentist. It seems unlikely that Glenn Jacobs would have ever ended up out of work. With his considerable height, his easiness to work with, and the fact that he seems to be the least problematic and least egotistical wrestler that has ever lived, Jacobs is a welcome addition to any wrestling locker room. But after 2 loser gimmicks, Dr. Isaac Yank and DDS and the Imposter Diesel, a better effort needed to be made to take advantage of Jacobs' positives. With less care or worse execution, the role of The Undertaker's charbroiled evil brother could have been as laughable as the Black Scorpion or the Shockmaster. Instead, once Kane arrived on the scene in his flame-printed mask and bodysuit, Jacobs firmly hit his mark. Kane needed to be presented as an absolute equal to The Undertaker in terms of power and intimidation. The combination of strong booking and Glenn's best efforts succeeded on that front. More than 2 decades later, Kane still pops up occasionally, all while semi-retired Jacobs pursues a run for mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. Number 5, double save for the new age. The last few entries all tie in with 1997, which may explain the Attitude Era's success. WWE was finally putting viable talents in the best position to succeed. Take the case of Rockabilly and Double J Jesse James. To watch them wrestle each other to near silence provided no indication that they were less than a year away from the biggest runs of their careers. But first, they had to come together. James assumed the Road Dogg persona out of thin air and appealed to a tire-spinning Rockabilly to join his vague cause. That was good enough for the man who would soon become Badass Billy Gunn. Once the New Age Outlaws joined forces, they took over WWE's tag division with blunt trash talk, creative cheating, and, most importantly, a long string of victories. With this combination in play, the Outlaws became so popular that the face turn wrote itself. 2 men that could have become casualties of the WWE roster shifting of 1997 were suddenly among the company's top stars. Dogg and Gunn may have had a difficult time duplicating their 1998 to 99 success in later years, but it was that success that gave them permanent residence in wrestling history as pop cultural icons. Oh, you didn't know? Number 4, back that new gimmick up. Vince McMahon loves Samoans. In fact, he loves Samoans so much that sometimes he dresses them as Middle Easterners and gives them names like the Sultan. WWE's attempts to make Head Shrinker Fatu into something outside of the stereotypical wrestling islander proved ineffective in the mid-90s, and the agile behemoth would depart WWE in 1998. More than a year and a half later, Fatu would resurface as Rikishi, now with bleached blonde hair and tights that bared his bulbous backside. One that had seemingly grown hugely since his days teaming with Samu. Are steroids a thing? What started out as an Attitude Era oddity morphed into a mainstay of the time, as his dance-happy partnership with Too Cool and his penchant for sitting on the noses of hated villains revitalized Fatu's career in a way few could have imagined. Everybody loved a stink face when somebody they hated was enduring the heavyweight cheeks. Rikishi would get plenty of mileage out of his role, including 5 good years in WWE and years afterwards as an indie headliner. His sons Jimmy and Jey Uso get an honorable mention for this list, reinventing themselves from obnoxiously happy babyfaces to raw, charismatic guardians of the mythical Uso Penitentiary. But their father had more of an uphill battle when it came to staking a bigger claim in the wrestling world. Number 3, Attitude Adjusted. If the story is to be believed, then it was Stephanie McMahon that lobbied for John Cena to keep his job in 2002. It does seem far-fetched that WWE would give up on the muscular, enthusiastic Cena so quickly, especially as part of the first big wave of Ohio Valley grads, but we'll humour this tale. Stephanie, you are a fantastic woman. Mrs. Ladyballs apparently stuck her neck out for the boyish Cena, believing he possessed all the tools needed to connect with crowds. That became evident on Halloween, when Cena dressed as Vanilla Ice and dropped some rhymes on Stephanie during a SmackDown costume party. Gritty rapping would become part of Cena's overall package, along with throwback jerseys, vulgar disses, and a gives no F's attitude that set him apart from much of the WWE pack. It didn't take long for everybody to come to the same conclusion. Mega stardom was beckoning John Cena. 16 world titles, mainstream success, WrestleMania's headlined, and millions of ineffectual boos later, Cena has reached heights that very few wrestlers will ever see. He needed to ditch the generic trunks for pairs of jorts in order to forge that path, but once he did, it all started to come together. Number 2, meanness is bliss. When Alexa Bliss rocks the mic on Monday Night Raw these days, she shows just how far above her contemporaries she is as a speaker. While others struggle with their dialogue, Bliss comes off as every bit the spiteful witch that she's designed to play. It's almost hard to believe that at one point in her career, the steely-eyed Bliss worked as a babyface. It's also hard to fathom that Bliss was nearly let go by WWE. Her babyface character wasn't clicking down in NXT, and by the summer of 2015, her time was apparently running out. When she turned heel to manage Blake and Murphy, she recognized it as a warning. Make this work, or you won't be around too much longer. Less than 2 years into her career, Bliss was staring down the barrel of uncertainty, and the pressure was on to connect as a villain. Today, she reigns supreme as the quintessential heel, with the mannerisms, timing, and promos to pull off the role almost effortlessly. Bliss is a perfect example of how finding the right role for a person can reveal great potential, and why sometimes you may just be giving up on somebody a little too soon. Number 1, if it ain't broken, break it. By the time 2016 rolled around, it was fair to say that Matt Hardy was treading water. By this time, 41 years old with WWE deep in his rear view, Hardy was wrestling the likes of Brother Jeff, Drew Galloway, and EC3 in Impact Wrestling. Not exactly creating much buzz while doing so. It seemed like Hardy's best days were behind him. Then it happened. Hardy became broken. Suddenly speaking with a faux elegant accent while reveling in a world of kooky madness, Hardy at first confused audiences with his surreal surroundings and offbeat behavior. Once he challenged his brother to the final deletion that summer, a cult classic was offered up to the world. The whole spectacle was something out of David Lynch's masturbatory fantasies, but it signaled the return of Matt Hardy in a fashion few could have imagined. Hardy has extended his career by not embracing the absurd, but by full-on engaging in tawdry sex with the absurd. He demonstrated a complete lack of inhibition with his broken universe, and a large number of fans were charmed by its core insanity. A great number of performers may have been afraid to take such creative leaps, while Hardy was happy to go in head first. So that's our list. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and you can follow me on Twitter here. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.